Hello, everybody. I'm John Maytham, and Athol Williams is also on the screen. And Athol is the author of this book, which, if you haven't bought already, I really suggest that you go and buy fairly soon. Deep Collusion, Bain and the Capture of South Africa. It is the story of Athol's involvement with Bain, and the beginning of his involvement with this consulting company was one that gave him an enormous amount of pleasure and pride, because he believed that it was doing his career a power of good by being involved with this big multinational. And the company seemed to embody the values that he thought were important. And because of that fairly long and very positive interaction with the company, it took him a while to realize that at best it was only a facade. Rip that facade aside and you get something which is not pretty at all. And the book starts with two words. And when I'd finished, and I'm a journalist, so I follow what's happening at the Nugent Commission of Inquiry and the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. So I kind of know this stuff. But seeing it set out the way Athol has set it out in this book, boom, 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 you follow the chain of events. And I ended up with a slight variation on the two words with which the book starts. I ended up by closing the book and saying, "The fuckers." Athol, because really, I mean, it's a terrible tale to have to tell, because you were part of it, and we know that you've left the country out of fear for your safety at the moment. So you've had to deal with a deep sense of betrayal by the company, betrayal of the values that you, as a development activist, wanted to be inculcated in South African business, South African society. So, it's kind of like a purging, I suppose.
Yeah, John, as you say, I've had a long history with Bain. I started with Bain at the age of 25 in their global head office in Boston. And it was a dream come true for me. I understood that Bain was this incredible organization. The working positions at Bain were highly coveted. Of my 250 MBA classmates, only 3 of us got to have internships at Bain, and I was one of those 3. So it was always a great honor to be part of this amazing organization. And I've remained part of the organization for over 20 years, both working there, leaving, coming back, working as an advisor to the firm or as an employee of the firm. And the fact that I kept going back and forth just shows that we had this fantastic relationship of mutual respect. I respected the firm and left when I wanted to do different things. And when I wanted to come back, they welcomed me back. So it was a shock to me, firstly, when in 2018, listening to the Nugent Commission to hear what had happened. But even then, I thought, well, okay, something small's gone wrong here. This must be fixable. There must be a good explanation for this. And that's how I got involved, because they asked me to get involved to help them just to navigate through this. But it was always navigate through to do the right thing, right? I got the assurances from everyone at Bain, all the way up to the global managing partner, that Bain wanted to do the right thing in South Africa. They wanted to fix this, and could I come in and help? And then, as you say, to then go in and then discover that I've actually been duped, that actually this is one massive cover-up, and they've placed me right in the center of it. So for me, yes, there was this massive sense of betrayal. It was betrayal of this company that I've had this long relationship with. It was a betrayal of me having staked my reputation on going into the firm when everyone else was going the other way. Bain's clients were leaving, Bain's senior people were leaving the country, people were resigning left and right. And I said, no, I'll come in and help. And then to discover that they were actually lying to me and manipulating me, that was just added insult to injury.
So you come up with this phrase, Bain truth. There's truth and there's Bain truth. And Bain truth and the truth are often very, very far apart.
Yeah. Often when you listen to in the courtroom, the judge will say, or the oath says, I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And it's that whole truth part that I think Bain used creatively. I use this phrase, Bain truth, because they kept doing the following. They would avoid outright lies, but what they would do is just tell half-truths. So it's a half-truth while telling everyone they were telling the whole truth, right? So read Bain's public statements. It talked about being open and transparent. It talked about asking for patience while they conducted an investigation, and then they'd release the results. It was all Bain were going to come clean, Bain with his good guys, Bain brought in Athol, and we're going to tell the truth. That was what they're saying publicly. Meanwhile, they were withholding documents from the Nugent Commission. They were withholding witnesses from the Nugent Commission, and they were only answering questions that the Nugent Commission would ask. So when the Nugent Commission says, tell us everything you know that will help us get to the truth, Bain would just drip feed things as the Nugent Commission was asking. And so for me, this idea of Bain truth emerged, this practice, which I think, by the way, most companies use, to only tell us little bits and not give us the full sense of what really happened. And John, why I think that's important in South Africa, I think there's intrinsic value in truth itself, right? And we're in a country with a history of never knowing the truth, and so we yearn for the truth. But I think the truth is the first step towards justice. We can't begin to heal and get justice in our country if we don't know what happened. And what Bain knows is not only about what they did, but what many others did. And what I reveal in this book, I would have hoped Bain would reveal. But even that, I think it's less than 10% of what Bain knows.
People follow. I'm going to chat to Athol for a while, and then I'm going to open the floor, can't really open the floor to questions, but use the chat function and post comments and post questions, and then I'll leave some time at the end to check in with those and then raise them with Athol. We need to, I think, the way that you have organized the book and the way you take us by the hand and lead us through all of this, it's really powerful and almost impossible not to believe that you are leading us into the land of proper truth. But let's go back to the beginning where this all started. Bain's desperation to get into public sector consulting, coinciding with the arrival in South Africa as managing partner of a man whose ethics quite clearly can be questioned. That's the seed from which this poisonous tree grew.
That's right. And Bain understood that the management consulting industry or the market in the public sector is huge in South Africa. And I think it's a tragedy how huge it is, because we've carved out or hollowed out our management capability in our state-owned enterprises and government departments. And we've become incredibly reliant on consultants. But be that as it may, Bain knew that was the market to crack if they wanted to have stellar growth. I was involved with Bain in 2009, even before Masoni was there. I was a partner in the South African business. And John, we built our business plan for the South African business on the private sector alone. So in our minds, we could build a sustainable, great business in South Africa, serving the private sector, which is Bain's expertise around the world, and then gradually perhaps grow into the public sector. But that was, growing at a reasonable rate. When Masoni and his higher-ups decided they needed much higher growth rates, that's when the private sector was not going to be enough, and so they had to go into the public sector. Now, to Bain's benefit, or what hurt them, it happened to coincide also when we had a president in Jacob Zuma. So they found that going into the public sector, I'm guessing, required not just completing tenders and competing openly and competitively with others, it required different ways of doing business. And whereas I would have said, well, that's a market we're staying away from, Bain obviously decided with Masoni that that was a market they were quite willing to engage with, however one engaged with that market.
I thought I knew the story reasonably well, but what I didn't understand was the degree to which Telkom was used as a kind of precursor to the much more notorious involvement with SARS and Tom Moyane. And you don't write well of Sipho Maseko and Jabu Mabuza, two people whose names are not ordinarily put into the category of question marks against.
And that worries me, that there are many people like Sipho Maseko and Jabu Mabuza who we all walk around lauding as great South Africans, as great leaders, when they are intimately involved in Bain, SARS, Zuma, Moyane. You can't talk about Bain, SARS, Moyane, and Zuma without talking about Maseko and Jabu Mabuza, because they're intimately involved. And as you say, I mean, Masoni himself says to his boss in one of his performance assessments, he says that Bain was tested by Zuma at Telkom. So before we got to SARS even, there was a test, and Zuma was testing Bain. Now, when you're testing Bain in this context, John, it's not testing Bain's technical abilities. It was testing whether Bain would go ahead with the way Zuma wanted to do things. So they were tested at Telkom, and that's how Maseko and Mabuza got involved. Now, what might not have made the final version of the book was the explanation of how Maseko and Mabuza had met before either of them were involved with Telkom. We talk about the plan to go into Telkom. They then took that plan along with Masoni to Zuma. So this wasn't a case of, oh, there was a recruitment process and the board decided Maseko was the best person for the job. No way. This was planned. This was planned more than a year in advance of Maseko arriving there. And it's quite telling that within the month of Maseko being appointed as CEO at Telkom, where does he go for an update? To Zuma's office, along with Masoni. So you're absolutely right. There was this project called Project Phoenix, which talked about restructuring our entire ICT sector in South Africa, with Telkom at the center of it. So Telkom was going to be the center. They were going to add on SABC, they were going to add on Centec, they were going to add on the post office, restructure the whole thing, concentrate its assets and infrastructure in one place so you could loot all in one place. And at the center of this was going to be Maseko and Mabuza. I mean, the story of how Mabuza becomes chairman of Telkom is laughable. And maybe that could be a discussion for another time.
One of our guests just posted a comment saying that Sipho Maseko wasn't called to the Zondo Commission to testify. And I want to play devil's advocate a little here, Athol, and say, is there something intrinsically wrong with the idea of this ICT project centering all the, I mean, is it not possible of an interpretation that says it was done with the best of intentions? It wasn't done with the intention to have all the assets in one place so they could be more easily looted. It was an intention to put them all into one place because it was thought, wrongly or otherwise, that this would be a good way to run the country's IT infrastructure.
Yeah. John, I think we can, I think the argument would still fail, but it would be a fair argument or a reasonable argument if we look at each of these components separately, right? So let's look at Telkom only. I think there's a reasonable argument you can make for why what they were doing there was the right thing. You can look at SARS and say, let's make a reasonable argument for the restructuring of SARS. Let's look at DBSA, let's look at PIC, let's look at IDC, all the places Bain was working. You might be able to make an argument. I would say you still couldn't fully make that argument. But when you take them all together, when you take the fact that Bain were meeting with Zuma up to 18 times behind closed doors after hours at his residencies and discussing all of these plans and discussing them in the context of the ANC manifesto, discussing them in the context of repurposing and restructuring the South African economy, I think that's when I begin to say, no, this is not something that can be even justified on its own, but when put in the context of this broader plan, it becomes obvious that there was ill intent here, especially when you consider the fact that a lot of these plans were developed with these executives long before they were there. Now again, John, Bain would say, well, what happened with Maseko and what happened with Moyane was CEO coaching, right? That's the phrase they would use. And I, as a partner at Bain, we would do CEO coaching, which means we take a CEO who's either starting a new job or is about to start a new job, and we'd spend some time with him sharing some of our IP to help him prepare. But that was always in the context of a relationship, firstly. So I know John, we've been working together for 10 years. He's on to his next job, and so I'm going to help him. It would be that context, which didn't exist with Moyane and with Maseko. And you only make the investment with the reasonable understanding that that person's actually going to get that job, right? So Bain invested in Maseko and Moyane for over a year. This is very expensive investment. It's consultants' time, it's opportunity costs, etc., to invest in for over a year in each of these guys. Bain need to have had certainty these guys are going to get that job. And as Moyane himself testifies in the Zondo Commission, in fact, Moyane had the certainty, and he told Bain about that certainty. So I think Maseko had the same certainty, right? So again, it goes back to my point about how Maseko, Mabuza, and others planned this, right? So I'll end on this point, John. So we look at Telkom, we say, but wow, Telkom's actually doing quite well. So maybe what's the complaint?
Exactly, that's
what's the complaint? Now for me, this begins to sound like Helen Zille's colonialism argument that says, well, forget about the atrocities of colonialism, but bridges were built, so it must be a good thing. And it's the same argument, right? We can't justify what happened at Telkom, a predetermined, premeditated attack on Telkom and other SOEs, and justify it because Telkom's worked out well. I think that's fluke in many ways. The fact is there was a plan to go in there, and they broke recruitment rules, procurement rules, and many other, I think, rules as well.
Well, let's talk a little bit more then about SARS, which is, I use the phrase, more notorious, and the damage done to SARS is quite obvious. I mean, the likes of Moyane and others in the RED faction continue to deny it, and they continue to blame other aspects of our life rather than that. But it seems to me an unrebuttable argument, as put out in your book, that SARS was hollowed out. But again, and I know it's a naive way, was it from the beginning hollowed out with the intention of making sure that it became ineffective in its task of tracking down tax money from those who were not paying it, and so on? At what point was that a notion which was pre-decided, that somewhere in that nexus of Masoni and Zuma and Moyane, there was a decision, let's weaken SARS so that illegitimate money is not found and confiscated?
John, nowhere did I see a document that stated it in that straightforward a way. I don't think that's how criminals work. I don't think gangsters sort of write down their plans of what they're going to do. So no, I can't say categorically that was the intention and at what point that intent was developed. All I can do is begin to infer from some of the behaviors, right? So I'm trying to understand, and again, innocently, right? Because this was I did in 2018. Remember, I got involved thinking, Bain's an amazing, good company. Some little things, some misunderstandings happened here, right? And so I was trying to explain what happened. And so you say, Bain goes into SARS, which by any measure, by any source, would say was one of the best run state institutions in our country, one of the best tax revenue agencies in the world. At no point does Bain make a case for restructuring SARS. Bain conducts a diagnostic that shows there's opportunities for improvement. Of course, any organization's got opportunities for improvement. In fact, SARS themselves had developed a continuous improvement plan. They knew there were faults, but they had plans for every one of them of what they knew to fix it. They were on a journey. So Bain comes in a snapshot, says, problems over here, right? Let's restructure the entire organization. Now, I don't think you need to be a management consultant, John, to understand that when you restructure an organization, it's the absolute last resort for what you do in an organization, especially one as large and complex as SARS. You always try and improve things with the organization intact, right? And what Bain did wasn't a tweak. It wasn't move one person from here to there. They ripped apart years and years of institutional memory, years and years of doing things the way people developed to do it, move things around, destroy capabilities. Now, again, I ask, what was the case for that, right? Where was the argument for why that was necessary? And I talk to people who had SARS and they say, look, for 2 years, they were just made redundant, but not left the firm. They continued to be in the company, paid full salary. One woman said to me, her boss was quite fine. She did an MBA while coming to work every day and being paid at SARS. So I'm looking at it saying, why would Bain and Moyane restructure an organization, destroy capabilities, move capable people to the side, pay them, but have them do no work, while you reorganize it in a completely different way with people incapable of doing the job? That's where I come out, John. So did Moyane say, you're going to destroy SARS? I don't know. I never heard it or saw it, but his behavior suggests that was the intent.
And I equally think unrebuttable argument that they got the contract illegitimately.
Yes.
And that it was knowingly, illegitimately gained, both on behalf of Masoni, and it's another question to which we'll come later, the extent to which Bain, outside of Masoni, was implicated in all of this, or simply looking the other way, or more directly involved. And again, just to read, Athol, in this book, how they lied and how they cheated in order to get paid vast sums of money with none of the proper procedures, none.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It wasn't just that they got the contract illegitimately, as you say. It was the extensions that they got illegitimately. They basically, John, and they rigged the system, and we can talk about how they rigged it, but Bain was awarded a 6-week contract for something like 2.3 million rand. That's what Bain was awarded. In the end, Bain was there for over 2.5 years and was paid 164 million rand without going back to the market, right? Now we're going to ask, how do you possibly do that? The committee at SARS that awarded Bain the 6-week contract stipulated explicitly that any extensions of this contract must go back to the market. And this is where Bain and Moyane's team, over an extended period, just used all kinds of trickery to try and get the contract extended. The one thing they did was, the initial contract they said was, it was just phase 1. But now there's phase 1A and phase 1B. So we're not extending the contract beyond 6 weeks. We're now doing phase 1B, right? Trickery, Bain truth. They also tell Treasury that it's an emergency. They've got to continue into phase 2 because it's an emergency. Again, Bain truth and trickery. So this was the process they kept following. And I, for example, John, showed in the book and in my evidence to the Zondo Commission that the SARS procurement person contacts Bain for references even before the RFP goes out, right? So, how does this happen? Then we discover that actually a Bain executive, Fabrice Franzen, wrote the first draft of the RFP. So to your question about intent, right? There's a number of aspects here of intent, which just suggests Bain never entered SARS as a good, clean, honest organization with honest intent. They went along, actively rigged the system to get in and stay, and they planned this document with Moyane's action steps, way in advance. The emails that Masoni sends, he doesn't ever call it CEO coaching. He says to his boss, he's developed a strategy for SARS with Moyane, right? Never calls it CEO coaching.
Yeah, I see Johan van Ochrenberg is one of the people who is listening to us, and Johan has some stories to tell about SARS as well. He's got a question which I'll try and get to towards the end. But I mean, again, I try to read books like this with an open mind. I try to go, okay, story I'm told, and by and large it's the story I believe, but where are the holes in the story, if they are? There is Williams trying to exculpate himself or whatever the case may be, and it's really hard to do because it is so logically set out and so backed by documentation and emails and so on. And again, it's quite clear that Bain and Moyane arrived at SARS wanting to get rid of anybody who would argue against or fight against what they were trying to do. You know, Barry Hall, the chief operating officer,
They name him. They name him, right?
Yeah.
They put him in the documents. They name Barry Hall. They use the initials BH, but as the COO, so it's so obvious that it's Barry Hall. And he was meant to be tested as well. This was explicit, and we all know that when Barry Hall eventually left, a few weeks after Moyane arrived, Franzen and Masoni and Bain exchanged emails, you know, joking about the fact that Barry Hall is now gone, right? So this was you know, part of the plan. It was, in my mind, the difficulty, I think, and I like your approach of saying, let me see where there might be holes in this story. And as you say, firstly, it's all Bain's documents. So it's strange that Bain went to the Zondo Commission saying, look, this Williams guy is just making all of this up. This is a complete conspiracy. And I go, but it's your documents. I just took your emails, your documents, and handed it over. So I don't know what you think I'm fabricating here. So it's entirely Bain's documents, and everything's based on the documents I had. But it is complex, John. It's not like there was a pot of money and Bain went in and took it, right? I think what was beautiful, and I can imagine Zuma jumping up and down with excitement when he heard about these Bain guys, because they could now present the restructuring of SARS and a lot of the other restructuring and repurposing with this veneer of credibility. Because you could present it with all the jargon and all the pretty words, and behind it all is this really ugly stuff. So look at that example where Bain says to Moyane, you must neutralize people. And when the Zondo Commission sort of goes in shock saying, what do you mean neutralize people? It sounds like mafia language. Bain comes back, their head of global legal, Stuart Min, sends a letter to the Nugent Commission explaining what neutralize means. And I, having been a Bain partner, been at Bain related with Bain for over 20 years, I mean, he was just lying. That word neutralize is never used in Bain's language. When I speak to other Bain people, they say we never use that term neutralize. We never neutralize people, right? So this was unique language used to be very clear about what was to be done. Moyane had his marching orders of what he was meant to do to neutralize people because they knew those people would stand in the way of the plan.
The Bain continued to say this was kind of a rogue actor. Masoni was a rogue actor. Yeah. You point out that very early on, upon his arrival, there were already people in the Johannesburg office were saying, this guy, whoa, we're not so sure we want to work with him. Those concerns were raised with head office. Yeah. And basically you suggest, and it's an entirely credible suggestion, that head office looked the other way because it looked as if he was going to be bringing stacks of money. And he did. You know, Masoni, Bain, working with SARS particularly, the revenues for Bain Global were staggering. Partners were buying an extra Porsche Taycan as a result of what he was doing. And you quite obviously, it's clear from some of the chats that a lot of people have already read the book, that you don't buy the rogue actor working by himself.
There's no organization, it's very rare that an organization has a senior person who can be that isolated from anyone else in any organization, right? Let alone a consulting firm, which is a partnership. So the way that the consulting firms work is you've got to account for all the resources you use. If Bain was meeting with Zuma, for example, up to 18 times, I saw 11 documents, fat, detailed documents which produce. That would have taken teams of people within Bain to produce, right? So Masoni would have had to go to his recruiting manager and his other managers and partners and say, please, I need teams of people to produce this work. So already they would be others involved in this. But then he had other partners working with him. You know, the partners in the Johannesburg office knew what was going on to varying degrees. So my view is Masoni was supported from below and endorsed from above, right? You know, just three little data points. One, in Johannesburg, a few months before Masoni testified at the Nugent Commission, the entire Johannesburg office gave him a standing ovation at an offsite to celebrate his leadership, right? These weren't people kind of thinking this is a dodgy guy. These are people thinking this guy's a hero. At Bain's worldwide partner meeting, when all the partners globally got together, they called Masoni onto the stage to celebrate this great leader who's made something amazing of this business in South Africa, right? I mean, even I was impressed, to be honest, John. When I saw what Masoni was doing with the size of the business, without knowing how he did it a few years ago, I was impressed. I thought this guy is a miracle worker. And then just the fact that we know people up the chain knew what he was doing, right? His boss knew what he was doing. Bain had no financial and legal senior people in Joburg. So any contract that they entered into had to go either to Europe or to the US. And so these things would have been going up and down between the US and Joburg all the time. There's no way that Masoni was a lone rogue doing something that no one else knew anything about.
This is important, Athol, I think for many reasons. One of them, though, being if you understand the level of their guilt, then you understand better what would be an appropriate response. Yes, they've paid back the money, but you make the point again and again, and very powerfully, that paying back the money is not enough.
Yeah, well, they've paid back the fees earned at SARS. So firstly, with regard to fees, they haven't paid back the fees earned anywhere else. The telecom fees, the DBSA fees, all the others, right? So that's one point. Bain's goal is to keep us focused on SARS because their lead partner of their law firm, Baker McKenzie in South Africa, the lead partner, Daryl Bernstein, said to me, we're quite happy to have people focus on SARS because if they hear about what we did elsewhere, it'd be far more embarrassing, far more troublesome. Right, and so they've paid back the fees at SARS. Let's be clear, none of the other fees. Secondly, they've made no amends for the harm caused. Real people's careers at SARS were damaged. At Telkom, careers were damaged. At BCX, which was a subsidiary of Telkom, careers, livelihoods shattered. That's before we talk about the institutional damage to SARS and then the damage to our economy. So this is different, and that's what I kept saying. This Bain situation is very different from the others we've had in state capture for two reasons. One, all the others were involved in the implementation of state capture, whereas Bain is the only consulting firm, the only firm sitting with Zuma planning this. And secondly, while the others might have messed up PRASA and Eskom to our detriment, but when you damage the revenue service, that's when you cripple the economy, when you cripple the society, and that's where Bain was. So for me, the amends they owe South Africa is profound, and the 200 million fees they've paid back is an insult to what they owe us.
What would you regard appropriate acknowledgement of culpability?
I've presented a process, a 6-step process, which I've shared with the Zondo Commission, with Bain, with anyone who would listen. I've had it in the media a number of times. A 6-step reparations process built on restorative justice principles. I think that's what we need. So I'm not looking for a number at the outset. It's a process you're going to go through of acknowledging the harms you've done, of acknowledging the victims, of apologizing, and then co-creating a plan to make reparations. It's an extensive program that Bain needs to go through to make reparations. And this is what I thought they wanted me to do. Right, so I designed a draft of this when I went in. So that's what we need. We need an extensive process of restorative justice that Bain's got to follow.
Let's talk now about the way that you were suckered into playing a role which, looking back on now, is obviously a source of great discomfort to you. You had very positive experiences of Bain. And you make several references to a book on the art of the con, and relate that to your experience with Bain from 2018. How naive is too strong a word, but you were much more gullible than you should have been, and you acknowledge that in the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that book, The Art of the Con, talks about it, and she says it's got nothing to do with intelligence or education or anything else. And she says people who are driven by a belief in something are the most susceptible to being conned. So if I just believe that you're an honest person, then no matter what you do, in front of me, I'm going to believe you're an honest person. And that's how I related that book to my experience. I believed Bain were good people. It was a good organization. I had this long record with them. They gave me my boost. My career started. I went from apartheid South Africa to Bain. That was, of working in mining towns where they told me to use the toilet at the back of the factory because I was black, to going to Boston where I had this amazing experience. So I had this massive loyalty to Bain. They were my mentors, and my friends. So you start off kind of thinking these are just really good people. Added to that, John, was my belief, and a lot of my academic work had been around making reparations of what ethical behavior entailed. So obviously, right, if you're trying to con someone like me, you kind of go two things, right? Athol, remember your long track record. You know us, we're good people, right? Come, let me hold you around the shoulder. Let's walk. Let's go have an expensive lunch. And remember all the times we had. So that's what they did. And secondly, they kept saying to me, well, they are so serious about ethics and corporate responsibility that they want me to help them establish a global practice within the firm, because they want to take my IP to across the world to help other companies struggling the way they were. Now, I'm no fool, but at the time of thinking, wow, as an academic, this is a dream come true, right? I can take all these theoretical ideas I've developed about corporate ethics and actually put it into practice. So my friends are telling me this. The global head of the business, has a meeting with me where he tells me this, right? I'm set up perfectly for the con. I'm grateful, though, that, again, that I'm no fool. So even with me going in with that positive attitude, I began to slowly see that I was being played. So when they had a meeting where they were meant to present materials to me, and they didn't present it to me, but remember the one meeting where the guys at Baker McKenzie, America's largest law firm, say to me, look, they're going to read the document to me. I won't see it, but it's the same as if I've seen it, right? Because they're going to read it to me. And I said, what are you talking about? And they insist that they would read it to me, and it's the same as me seeing it. And then when I challenge that, they go, well, would you lie? Would we lie to you, Athol? Right? So challenging again this idea of ethics. And so, yes, I was duped into initially believing it. But the moment I switched onto it, there was no way I was going to be there. My ethics wouldn't allow it. My passion for our country wouldn't allow it. And it was very simple to me. It was country first, then Bain. And so the moment I got a sense that they were both conning me and lying to the South African public and refusing to make full reparations, I had to leave and had to blow the whistle.
Yeah, I mean, it's like me reading the book and with the foreknowledge of where it ends up to go, oh, goodness me, Athol, you were, wow. But I mean, there were suspicions, and you were, for the reasons you've just described, sitting on those suspicions. The fact that the law firm that you mentioned there was doing this supposedly independent investigation, and yet they were advising Bain independent investigation that they weren't doing.
It's these absurdities, right, which again, I was slow to catch on to. I mean, I very early on, within the first month of me being there, I do send an email to one of the Bain lawyers saying, oh, look, are you sure this is an independent investigation? Doesn't seem quite independent to me. And they sort of give me a response, say, don't worry about it, it's all taken care of, this is how things work. Now, because I had so much on my plate, because they brought me in to chair a committee that was going to oversee the investigation. And of course, there was no committee. So even that was a con, right? There was never going to be a committee. So I came in working part-time, overseeing this complex investigation with Bain's lawyers, Baker McKenzie lawyers, all of these things going on. So I was just overwhelmed. And so a lot of things I just let slip. So this idea of independent investigation is absurd, because Baker McKenzie are literally saying to Bain, while they're investigating them, advising them that this person shouldn't be a witness, we shouldn't reveal this information to the Nugent Commission. If you want to, we can decide to share this with the Nugent Commission. I mean, they were advisors, they were not independent investigators.
Again, you make it quite, there are several reasons why people refuse to acknowledge their wrongdoing. One is nobody likes to. Very few people like to admit I was wrong. There's the issue of corporate stench. You know, the stuff gets out and people believe it to be true of Bain. It doesn't help. But the most critical factor is that they were, excuse the bad language, but they were shit scared of an investigation by the Department of Justice into them.
Yeah. And they absolutely were. And it got to the point where I don't think they really cared about what happened in South Africa. It was all about the Department of Justice. And that's why they refused to let me engage with SARS. They refused to let me go to the media because they wanted to be silent and kept quiet so that the DOJ in the US would just, not think anything's happening. Now, what was problematic for Bain was they went very early on and gave the DOJ a story. And the more I was speaking publicly, and even after I left, I obviously gave facts that went against the story they'd given to the DOJ. And that again, they just kept wanting to shut that down. It's interesting, I posted on social media an extract from a document that Bain sent to me and a few other senior people, where they say, right, don't admit to being involved in any corruption. Don't admit to being involved in any rigging of tenders and any fraudulent behavior. Why does any organization create such a document in the first place? Only when you know you've been involved in these things and you've got to be that explicit with your senior people to say, please be quiet about these things. And
when the final official sundering happened, they cut off all your office communication, all your company supplied stuff, but they didn't realize, and it took you a while to realize as well, what a treasure trove of documents you had that had been private email address, and that was what you took to Zondo.
And that was just a stroke of good luck, John, and good luck for our country. When I first got engaged with Bain, I used my private email address and my private laptop. So when I received all of those documents, I received it all legally to my private email address, and so legally stored it on my private laptop. When I then joined Bain on a contractual and then on a part-time basis, they gave me a work laptop. But I just put my personal laptop aside. And so within hours of me blowing the whistle, they just disconnected my cell phone and my work laptop. They gave me 3 days notice that my healthcare benefits were going to be cut off. Really nice people, really care about their employees. But you're right. At that point, I thought.
And the flat that you bought in Johannesburg, thought you would need it. And they give money and they say, well, give it back.
We'll take that back. We'll take that back. No, exactly. So when I resigned from Bain, I thought, well, that was it, right? I mean, I'm unhappy. This is against my ethics. I'm leaving. And only afterwards did I realize, but wait, I've got that laptop at home. So when I went to that laptop and checked what I had, that's when I realized I've got this treasure trove. I then went to the Zondo Commission and said, look, I've got all these documents. I actually don't know what's here. It's just tons and tons of documents. They asked me to put the documents in some sort of order because it was going to be just too much for them to make sense of. So I spent Christmas of 2019 just going through these documents and putting them in order. And that's when I noticed how they pieced together. It's only that point in late 2019, so months after I'd left Bain, that I began to put these things together and say, but wait a second, this was not just a SARS problem. This was not just an isolated problem. This was a coordinated effort. There's documents which I reference in the book. They call it a tracker document, where they track all the meetings that Masoni had with Zuma, right? And there they got the attendees of the meetings. They know where the meetings were happening. They know what was discussed at the meetings. Now, those documents I just never took notice of before because, okay, so he met with Zuma. But now when you look and say, well, who else was in the meetings? That becomes very interesting. And you connect the different projects that they were doing. That becomes very interesting. And so only once I did that, did I get to the point of saying, I don't have suspicions anymore. I've got evidence that suggests this is a very strong case that they were involved in state capture.
I'm pretty certain that everybody listening to us now knows that you're not in South Africa at the moment. That 3 weeks, you thought that safety was of such a nature that it would it would be better to be cautious than to be valorous and leave. Of course, that you did not know that when this book was handed over to the publishers and printed, but you do express, and I see also that Cynthia Stimple is with us in this session. Comment. You do, as one must expect you to do, express deep disappointment with the way this country treats whistleblowers, the way that abandons them. And we're not just talking about the lack of government support. I mean, you also felt unsupported, unloved by UCT.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my view, and most whistleblowers feel this way, is that we step into danger in the interest of our country, but when we turn to our country and say, now help me and support me, we are let down. And that's exactly what happened to me. I literally had nowhere to turn. There's no number to call for whistleblower help. There's no website to go to for whistleblower help. I didn't know what to do. And so the Zondo Commission is saying to me, prepare an affidavit. I've never prepared an affidavit of this nature before. This is way more complex than I could possibly imagine. Involves implicating 39 powerful people. I contact law firms, and the law firms say to me, look, this is just too hot for us. They asked me for my list of implicated persons, which I sent to them. They then come back saying, look, they can't take on these people. I think some were just nervous about Baker McKenzie because of the size of Baker McKenzie. So no law firm would help me. I went to the civil society NGOs and they sympathized, but they got no resources to help me, right? I went to the Zondo Commission and said, I need legal help, right? I mean, I could write things that would get me into more trouble. And they said they can provide no legal help. So what do you do, right? And that's where the health problems then come in, because I was so stressed. And I then turned to UCT because I was a part-time senior lecturer in business ethics at UCT. I actually walked the talk of what I was teaching my students. And I said, I need time to go and prepare my affidavit and prepare for my testimony. And UCT said, well, you can take the time, but we're not paying you for that. So at the very time when I needed some income the most, I had no income. So literally I had a choice, right? Compromise the quality of my affidavit and keep a salary, or give up my salary and do a good job for my country. And again, I took the latter, John, but right, UCT then told me to leave because I wasn't able to do the duties they wanted me to do. There was no support from any quarters at all. And it still isn't, right?
Yeah. Athol was if Athol had not felt the need to leave the country, at least temporarily, we hope, he would have spent the weekend that we've just passed in the lovely country town of McGregor at the McGregor Poetry Festival. That's where Athol was due to be, because in addition to Deep Collusion, he's also recently published this volume of whistleblowing poems. And I was at a session and I had a copy of the book and I had permission from the people running the session, and Athol is on the board of the poetry magazine, the literary magazine, New Contrast, and Keith Gottschalk was there and Karina was there, board members were there, and I read this poem, and I hope you won't mind if I read it now. I thought I had it in front of me.
Is it Whistleblowers Wife?
Whistleblowers Wife.
Yes, the first one, yeah.
Here we go. Okay. So, I mean, it's not just Athol that's affected by this. This is a poem he wrote called Whistleblowers Wife. Hello, sniper, she says, opening curtains to another bunker day. She scans the muscular buildings outside, their square eyes leering, and the lurching stinkwoods, menacing arms and fingers gyrating, camouflaging her fears. She knows there are suits plotting his silence now that he's declared carry truth on his tongue. His conscience gifted her this despair. How does he return her peace, thieved and offered for the common good? She has shrunken as their world tightened around them, a chokehold where they expected an embrace. Every creak gets her full attention, every door rattle a defensive drill. The TV is silent, her laughter muted, heartbeat low. Yesterday, he tried to sprinkle sugar on her clouds with a surprise cake order for home delivery. A foolish, well-intentioned act, like holding a mirror to the sun to direct light into evil shadows, but just getting your hands burnt. She sent the delivery away and held him tight. Too risky. You're all the cake I need. How is it that those who dream of larger lives for all are confined to living the smallest? Why is it that those who stand up for freedom end up in captivity? His questions, not hers. She has things to do to keep their wheels turning. There probably is no sniper, but still she insists that he keeps away from the window. It's and that's what poetry does. It encapsulates experience in that way. So it's not just Athol Williams that is Athol Williams' wife, Athol Williams' children, Athol Williams' broader family and friends.
That's the tragedy. That's the tragedy, John. It's, in Long War to Freedom, Mandela, sitting in Robben Island, says, it's unfair on his family because he's used his conscience, he's acted according to his conscience, but it's impacted them. And that, you can see that thought in that poem, because the impact it's had on my mother, on my wife, on the rest of my family, it's unfair. It's just unfair. I mean, you act and you think you're doing the right thing, like I said, and we expected fully that there were going to be just support was going to be flooding in. And there were a lot of people who liked Facebook posts and, that sort of thing. But, I've had an income for over 2.5 years. And I support NGOs, I support other people, I've got dependents. And there isn't a single wealthy person, corporation, whatever, kind of saying, look, you've done an amazing thing, thank you, let us come and help you. Not one. And there's, that part upsets me because it's there's lack of compassion. For me, when I went to UCT, it was compassion I was looking for. I was saying to them, I'm struggling here, I'm hurting, I can't do my duties, I want to stay at UCT, help me make this work, right? And for them in that vulnerable, painful position to say, no, leave. For me, it's shocking. And so it's our country, we all keep going, how does corruption persist? Well, this is why it persists, right? As much I want to encourage people to be whistleblowers. Why would you be a whistleblower now when you have the experience what I've experienced, Mosilo Matepu, Cynthia Stimple, Bianca Goodson, Temba Maseko, we've all experienced this, Tabiso Zulu, you can go on and on about whistleblowers whose lives are shattered, and we, in apathy, we just kind of say shame and move on.
Athol, a couple of questions and comments from people who've been part of our session. Would you support criminal sanctions against Bain as a juristic person? From Duma asking that.
From Duma?
Yeah.
Duma and Lovo, perhaps?
No.
Okay. That's a person we haven't spoken about, and I hope more people will talk about is the role Duma and Lovo played in this whole saga. Because he's one of those people who walks around still a highly respected member of our society. But yes, I would fully support criminal proceedings against Bain. I also, for the longest time, wanted Bain to continue in South Africa because I believed they would make amends. I no longer believe Bain has any intention of making amends in South Africa. So I think Bain's become an enemy of South Africa and should not be allowed to operate in our country.
Okay. From Cynthia Stimple, fellow whistleblower, experienced many of the problems, if not all and more, that you have experienced. Bain should be reported to the SEC in the USA as well as that law firm. What's happening with that?
Well, the SEC is investigating, the DOJ is investigating, FBI has been to see me on more than one occasion. So I don't know what's happening. I don't have access to kind of, what's happening with those investigations.
And Cynthia also wants to know whether Tom Moyane should be prosecuted. Why not? I think it's a question a lot of us have, that these names are there and they've appeared, some of them more disdainfully and arrogantly than others, at the Zondo Committee. I suppose for a lot of this, Athol, we have to wait until the president releases the Zondo report. Deputy Chief Justice Zondo has until the end of the year to submit that report. Yeah. Unfortunately, Ramaphosa has a history of sitting for longer than most of civil society thinks.
Exactly.
But I suppose we've got to wait for that.
I think so, but also, John, we as society needs to be acting up, right? The tragedy for me again is there are companies in South Africa right now still doing business with Bain, right? With all that we know, there's still companies today doing business with Bain. The business leadership of South Africa, led by Busi Mavuso, today still defends Bain, right? So I'm at a loss. So we can wait for the Zondo report, right? But with all that we know today, there are still companies who say, we don't care about ethics and our country, we'll still do business with Bain.
A couple of people asked us in slightly different ways, or they stated this as fact, nothing's going to come from the Zondo Commission. Having had this experience and having had an engagement with the Zondo Commission, how high do you dare allow your hopes to get?
We shouldn't, if nothing comes of the Zondo Commission, that's not a criticism of the Zondo Commission. It's the Zondo Commission is a truth-finding entity, and I think they will unearth as much of the truth they can, not all of it. So, for example, like we said, they didn't even have Telkom as part of their investigation. But I think it's then up to the NPA and our other law enforcement bodies to do something with it. And I don't hold out great optimism about much happening, to be honest.
Oh dear. A specific question going back to what's in the book from Johan van Laffenberg. In late 2013, SARS tabled a 7-year strategic plan in Parliament, which was accepted. At this very same time, Bain and company developed what appears to be a strategic review and plan of SARS. Nowhere in the Bain document does it reflect that Bain has even bothered to look at the SARS strategy. Could Mr. Williams elaborate on this business practice, please? How was it possible for Bain to have done such a quote-unquote plan without even referring to what was on the go at the time?
That's a great question from Johan. John, again, you asked earlier about intent and whether this was, intent for damage. Bain has got a particular way of doing things, right? Bain people are, smart and problem-solving, but 80% of what we do is kind of, right, pre-designed, and so we're just customizing it to our clients. There's a way you do these types of work, and the one thing you do, you spend your first 2 months just spending time with your organization, understanding their journey, understanding their plans. That's what you do before you even come close to recommending profound changes like Bain did. So the fact that no one at Bain went and understood that plan that Johan describes, to me, is just a massive red flag that said they came in with a plan already. They weren't interested in SARS' journey. They weren't interested in where SARS thought it was going. They came in with a plan of where it should go, part of the state capture plan. So no, Johan, I don't think they went into the document at all. And like I said, they make no argument, no case for this restructuring. They just come and declare that they will restructure.
And a lot of people now just saying, thank you very much, you've been brave, and it's lovely to see people acknowledging the bravery of you and the other whistleblowers who have or haven't yet written books. And just to finish off with, because we are a few minutes away from running out of our Zoom hour, Athol Williams, man, husband, father, son, poet, how are you looking back on this journey? What thoughts are whirling around? Because it must be turbulent. There's no way that you can have peace and proper perspective on this at the moment. But what is whirling around in you?
John, so personally, I feel sad. I feel sad that this is, my life has come to this. I've worked hard all my life. I've earned those degrees that everyone always talks about. I spent time living homelessly in the US because I was so determined to be educated, to now to be reduced to where I am now. So for me, that's sad. And I think it's sad for our country that we have got to this point where we would just neglect our people who are acting in our interests. But I think the only way we are going to turn this around is, like I said at the end of my Zondo Commission testimony, we need brave citizens. We need to enter the era of the brave. It's only going to be when brave citizens say, I am not going to let this happen. I'm going to do something. So I'm going to hold my CEO accountable for being involved in corrupt practices. I'm going to hold my counselor in government accountable. I am going to do something. And the idea of bravery is when you're looking and you're facing danger, because I think what we are doing right now is most of us are looking the other way. We know the bad things that are going on and we're looking the other way. So John, for me, what gives me hope and what drives me firstly is that I believe that I will keep doing this. I will not be silent. Our country needs people to be speaking up and taking action. But my hope will be grown so much when others begin to do the same. Brave citizens taking action for our country.
And you do hope that it won't be too long before you're able to come back into this country and take up the fight again.
I do, yeah.
That's Athol Williams. This is his book, Deep Collusion, Bain and the Capture of South Africa. It's available at all good exclusive bookshops, and they aren't anything other than good exclusive bookshops. Athol, thank you very, 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 very much. And I do hope it won't be too long before I can take you out for a coffee or a glass of wine and celebrate your. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, John. I'd like that.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for joining in.